Welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is the Question Guy podcast. I'm here with Amanda Johnson, and we've got a story to give you. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But the conversation is going to start with a question, and I've never done that before, not in the way I'm doing it now. So, Amanda, are you ready? Because this is your life-changing question. Are you
Yes,
ready?
bring it. I'm ready.
What value do you have to give to the world today? And that question was asked of you. How long ago was it?
About 17 years ago.
Wow. And so
Yeah.
since then, it's been the journey. Let's talk about
I'm
that journey. Answer the question
figuring it out.
first.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have a good answer to that question the first time it was asked of me. I was 27. I was married. I had a little boy, and I was working from home for the woman who asked me that question. I was teaching people how to write well online in between, during nap time and nighttime. And she gave me the opportunity to read her book and asked me to edit it for her. And I went up to visit her for lunch because the book was so good. And I just wanted to tell her how amazing it was. And I asked her, what do you think will be like for someone? How does it feel to you to know that the person who starts the book isn't going to be the person who finishes it? Because it's so transformative. And she said, it feels great. When are you going to write your book? I mean, she didn't even take a breath. And I was like, oh, because I had two storylines going. I had the one that everyone saw, which was, honors graduate, really good mom, married and, pursuing my dreams. And the other storyline on the inside was I didn't know what I was doing. My marriage was on the rocks. My finances were in collapse. I wasn't sure about my career. I was going to be a teacher. And then I jumped out of that system really fast and I didn't know how to do life at 27. So when she asked me that, I thought, how about I write a book and then you can put your PhD on it? And she said, no, you have something to give today. What is it?
Hmm.
And I tried to shirk it again, made a joke about it. And she said, no, what value do you have to give to the world today? And that was enough to make me start crying, give her a quick hug, and hop into my car and drive home for about 45 minutes on a very windy mountain road. It was kind of dumb. I was crying really hard. But I kept asking myself that question because, a decade before I knew the answer. I was going to be a journalist. I was going to change the world. I was going to, like at 18, I had big dreams. And then, I got to college and I started asking big questions and I felt like life fell out from underneath me. And so while I was driving and asking myself that question, I had a memory, little flash of a moment that had happened not too long before this. My son was 3, maybe at the time. And we were living with my grandmother at the time, taking care of her. And uh, he broke one of her glass mirrors and she screamed at him. And there was one thing that everyone was put on notice not to ever say, that to ever call him a bad boy. Because, my responsibles, my adults had accidentally connected my worth with my behavior.
Hmm.
And so that was a no-no. And I told them that's not allowed. So we I heard her say, "You're such a bad boy," from the other room. And I started to run down the hallway to do something to her. I don't know what it was. I was so mad. But I got to the end of the hallway and I saw him with his hands on his hips, like in Superman's stance, looking up at her, 3 years old. And he said, I'm not bad. I made a bad choice and I'm sorry. And I was like,
Wow.
my work is done. Like, a generational curse just like gone.
Gone. Yeah.
So I'm driving home crying, wondering what in the world I'm contributing. And I get this memory. And I'm like, well, I
Hmm.
am doing the mom thing okay. Like I'm doing it really intentionally. And so by the time I got home, I had a series of books
In your
for
head.
children in my book. Just
Okay.
like I was a teacher. I was a trained writer. I was helping other people learn how to write, good editor, got all my friends through school, you know. So content development was easy for me. So I saw this entire series. I saw a training and development company that I was like, what? I'm going to be helping parents someday? Like that makes no sense. But I got home and I wrote it all down and I mapped it all out. And 3 months later to the day, I met Lisa Nichols in a Sizzler. And she invited me to a workshop. And my life was never the same. It was like the opportunity. It was like stepping into a parallel universe is really what it was like. Just one question.
So since that time, how many times have you re-asked the question for yourself? Do you continually add value to the world that you live in?
Yeah.
How do you do
Yeah,
that?
I do. I always say that being an entrepreneur or a messenger to someone who's putting a message into the world, um, it's like signing up for a constant identity crisis. Like the most
Explain that.
incredible
Wait a second.
was like the most incredible spiritual journey you can have, I think, because it's you and your imagination. There's no one really giving you rules, telling you what you can and can't do, what roles you should take. Like you get to invent the whole thing. And the only limits are the ones that you have for yourself.
Hmm.
And so, I have this great service that I want to offer. I want to help people write books. Well, that was awesome, but I didn't know how to do anything else. Sales, marketing, logistics, like and so at every phase I feel of looking at how can I serve people better? How can I make my services more effective? How can I help people not just write books that are true to intention, but become more true to intention? At every juncture of that, I have to face whatever my limit is
Mhm.
to make that thing happen. So
But then
I
you
would
surpass
say,
it.
and
You,
then I surpass it, right?
right.
Then I rally. I find my mentors, I find my allies. I put new structures into place, develop new habits, and yeah.
And that's the way it goes. And so let's
Mhm.
talk about your books because, quite frankly, I see a bunch of them behind you.
A lot of
What,
these I worked on as a coach. Some of them I've written. Yeah.
let's talk about the ones you've written first. What's one for let's talk about the first one, and then let's talk about the one you like the most. What
Okay.
about the first book you've written?
The one I like the most. Whew. Let's see. The first one is Upside Down Mommy. So in 2007, that lady asked me, what value do you have to give to the world today? I had a book series. I never wrote that book series. I ended up helping other people write books. And eventually, by about 2012, I was like, okay, I'm like the cobbler with no shoes, right? I'm helping people develop these books. Now we're helping to self publish them. I don't have this thing written, but my animals
They're okay.
it anyway. Um, so I thought it's time for me to write it, but I don't want to write that original thing. The original thing was like a series of children's books with parents, like a parent manual to go with it.
Right.
And so, what had happened between 2007 and 2012 when I got this idea is I had healed quite a bit of my story through the process of becoming a transformational facilitator and having to sit in those rooms and unpack my own stuff and then lead other people. That took it to a whole nother level. And so I wanted to tell people the story of how my relationship with my son was the thing that started it all. Because that woman asked me that question, but it was really that moment when I saw my son and I felt like, I don't really have any answers for you, dude. Like, we're going to have to figure out this life thing together. My spiritual life had been just absolutely devastated. My relationship was in a shambles. I didn't feel like I had the skills to do life. And so here I am with this infant thinking, I guess we're going to have to figure this out together. At least I know how to, change your diapers and feed you because I did that a lot with my youngest siblings, but like the emotional part, we were going to have to do together. So Upside Down Mommy is really my journey of being a mom and learning how to parent differently than I had been parented. and and to listen to him and let him be as much of a teacher to me as I hoped to be to him.
So just give us some insight, please, some teasers on what that looks like and what's in the book for our
It's
listeners, because they're going to want to buy it now because you just made such an impact. It made an impact on your life.
Yeah. Well, I use the butterfly framework a lot for as the core of what I'm doing at True to Intention, but that started with Aaron. So when he was about I don't know, 2 or 3 years old, of course, I didn't have the money to do this. I don't know how I got it, but I had this butterfly bungalow. It was like this net. Have you ever seen those? They're like netted tents that little kids can go inside and you order butterfly larvae and you get to watch this entire process happen,
Wow.
which
Mm.
sounds amazing. And it's even more amazing when you have a 2 or 3 year old who's like, every single thing. Like, I have to know every single thing that's happening. There's nothing happening for like 3 days, but it doesn't matter. And so there was this moment where we're watching this whole process, and I get to see this caterpillar just go upside down with no resistance. And I had a little something that was like,
Hmm.
why do you resist things that are natural? Why do you resist growth? Like, this caterpillar has a blueprint. It knows when to do this. It trusts the process. Little niggle. And so this thing goes upside down. We watch it turn into a full cocoon. And then we have to do the thing of taking it out of this little container and then fixing it up into the inside of the netted thing, which sounds like a hard thing to do anyways. But then you add a 2 year old to it and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to destroy these things because he's bouncing up and down. So I had to like get down to his height and say, look, if we don't be really careful, like no jumping, no knocking this out of my hands, because if these fall to the ground, they might not become what they're supposed to be. And he was like, okay. That little kid became an absolute, like he was like a little sentinel walking around this butterfly bungalow for the next few weeks while we waited for them to emerge. And he would tell everybody, be careful, don't get too close, don't knock them. If they fall to the ground, they won't become. He knew, he heard me. And then one day my grandma got too close and she kicked the thing and one of them fell off and hit the ground. Yeah, exactly. And I heard this blood curdling scream from the other room. And I knew what had happened because he'd
Hmm.
been warning her. And so I went in there, and while I was holding him, and he was like, oh my God, mom, it's not going to become what it's supposed to be. I was like, this is what parenting is like. Like,
Hmm.
this is what my parenting has been. I've been trying so hard to protect what's already there. Like, I'm not worried about shaping, developing it. He came with such personality and gifts. Like, I just wanted to protect it and keep it from being damaged and messaged wrong. And so I was working my butt off to do that, but I was just so scared that I was going to limit him, that he was going to, something terrible was going to happen. And I start that book with a moment where, I mean, if there are any moments in my mothering that I have absolutely failed and limited him, it was one of those. I had to tell that story at the beginning because what I found is that most moms who are trying to do it better and differently, and dads too, dads love this book too. Um, they have those moments doing their best, but their own stuff comes up and takes over in a moment and creates a wound for the kid that, you know, has to be looked at eventually. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's the nature of that book. Follows the butterfly process.
But then I would almost say, because I've not even heard your other books yet, that that's got to be on the top 10 list. What's your
Yeah,
favorite? Is that your favorite? Or what
I
is your
think my
favorite?
favorite is the one that I wrote with my son. We
Hmm.
published it not too long ago. It's called A Religion of Story. And um, I wrote Upside Down Mommy, and then I wrote Upside Down Messenger, which is basically the same time frame as Aaron, as the story of Upside Down Mommy, but it's told from the messenger view. So like, what was I going through as an entrepreneur? What were those limits that I had to face and the ways that I had to create structure to allow myself to dissolve and turn into something that I was meant to be more of.
Yeah.
And so, and then You Can't Make This Story Up. I did that in 2020. I think we released that beginning of 2021.
During
That's
the
his book.
pandemic.
Hmm?
During the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah,
Wow.
I invited everyone. So I invited I think we have 20 of my messengers in there who I the experience that I had with them witnessing their stories was so transformational for me, and their the way they impacted me through the process, a lot of them had no clue. They didn't know that their stories about abuse were helping me to sort through my stories about abuse. They didn't know that their stories of achieving potential were challenging me in all the ways and giving me ideas for how to do that myself. I was doing all of my own work kind of behind the scenes while I was supporting them front facing. And so I had this idea, enough of those. Like I had so many of those. I was like, people need to understand what happens when somebody writes their book and really faces their story. Like these people are freer than they were when they walked in. And they did it for themselves, right? Inside of a safe space, but they faced that story and they wrote new ones. And so I invited them, asked them to write their experience of working with me. And then at the end of each of their chapters, I write why they came into my life. What was the big lesson that they brought? And sometimes it was because of the message that they brought. And sometimes it's because we had a giant collision in the middle of our work together that we had to sort through. And I had to learn some other skills. So that's a really, I love that book for those reasons. But A Religion of Story, it felt like, well, I remember when I was working, I think it was on chapter 3, training. And I had this moment where I was writing from the mother perspective and the teacher perspective and the facilitator perspective. And I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, this is actually the answer to that question. What value do you have to give to the world? Like this is as much of all of me as I have right now in this book because it includes the whole journey. And so that is the story of how because I was, super messed up when Aaron got here, emotionally crippled, and it was becoming physical for me too. I couldn't do a lot with him, and we had, I was like trying not to make big messes because I didn't have the energy to clean them up, and so I spent a lot of time with him on the couch watching movies, feeling terrible and guilty about it, right? But it was like all I could do, and then we had this, drama in our family where we had kind of walked away from our religion. And I had requested, maybe put everybody on notice, that I didn't want them evangelizing my son until he was asking them questions. I didn't want the song stuck in his head. I wanted him to ask the question and for him to have a mind of his own when it came to his spiritual life. And so one day he came home from Nana's house and he said, where's our
Nana
Bible?
being,
My mother-in-law.
oh, okay. Okay.
And he said, why don't we have a Bible? And I'm like, oh my God, these people, I gotta keep these people together.
Isn't
And
that a sense of you wanting to protect him again?
I do,
Mentioned
absolutely.
that
It
earlier.
wasn't because I disagreed entirely with their religions or anything. It was like, before age 7, they're absorbing everything as true, whether
Mm.
it's true or not.
Yeah.
And and so I just wanted him to have the ability to experience as much as he wanted to, like, let's try this church. And what do you think about this religion? And they believe this. And what about that? And I wanted it to be more of a chosen thing for him rather than I wanted to preserve his agency at all costs for every aspect of his life, from choosing your clothes in the morning and what you're going to put in your lunch to what do you believe, kid? I wanted it to be all his. And so, I'm getting ready to lose my temper at the dinner table over this Bible thing. And my husband pipes up, actually, we do have a Bible. It's Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I was like, oh my God, you are a genius.
Wait,
You are
you lost me there. What?
Avatar: The Last
Yeah,
Airbender.
I got that, but you lost me as it's a correlation to the Bible, because isn't that a movie?
It's a Nickelodeon animated cartoon.
Okay. I don't have a young boys in my house. Um, so talk to me about the connected dots for me there. I'd
How did
love
that even
something.
work, right? Well, I had been trained in an honors program that was a classical books program. So for 4.5 years, I spent time reading great books and stories and debating with people about what are the big themes and what was the author's intention and how do we apply these concepts today. And so when my husband said that, I was like, it's so true because Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's a story about a little boy who's destined to become the avatar, which means he has to balance all four elements, fire, water, air, earth. He has to learn all of them and he has to bring the world together, but he has to do it inside of himself first. And so it's like the most beautiful spiritual journey of this little boy who finds out he's the avatar way too soon and decides, like, actually, I don't want to do this. And he runs. And then he gets frozen in ice for 100 years. And when he gets brought back and he gets thawed out, the world has changed and he has to hurry up and learn what he needs to learn in order to save the world. And so he has these friends that come together who know the different elements and they become allies who help teach him what he needs to learn. And so you get to watch him on this journey of becoming who he's meant to be, facing all of his fears, taking chances too early, not being able to let go of an attachment to someone to become who he's supposed to be.
Hmm.
And so there are all these beautiful themes that were moving me because, of course, I'm still trying to put myself together spiritually. And so I'm crying in front of this show. I'm having spiritual experiences while I'm watching this, looking at my husband saying, can you believe this isn't in a Nickelodeon cartoon? Like, how is this even possible that they're doing this? Who are these people? And so he and I had been having these conversations. So when he said, Avatar: Last Airbender is our Bible, I was like, yes, it can be, because I can talk about all of the themes from the Bible, and we can talk about morality, and we can talk about friendship, and we can talk about agency, and we can talk about faith in the context of these stories.
Hmm.
And so then it became everything. All of the stories that we engaged became an opportunity for me to build critical thinking skills with him, talk about, who has the most character and who do you admire and who do you kind of hate. And we would have these great conversations when he was little. The one thing that he hated about it was me pausing the show, like,
Were you
what do you
taking
think about
notes?
this? And he'd be like, Mom, ask me at the end. He would be so upset with me. But this was our life while he was at home. And um, so one day he was about, I want to say he was 17 years old, and he was in this amazing school. Talk about giving kids agency. It was like college students for high school. They get to choose your everything, show your proficiency, get your diploma in a completely different way. Like he was coming alive with learning again. And so he had this one class called Human Spark. And this teacher was like a Renaissance lady. I mean, she like music, science, math, like she knew all the things. And so she brought to class one day that some research that she said, I kind of think that maybe you all will be able to choose immortality by the time you're my age.
What?
And
Wow.
right. Like health engineering, the health sciences and AI, and like she's looking at all these different things. And she's like, it's possible that maybe uploading conscious, like whatever the case may be. It was this case that she was making for a possibility.
Wow.
And so beside, normally he answers the question, how was your day? With it was good or fine,
At
normal teenage
17. Yeah.
stuff, right? But this day he said, my teacher posed a really interesting thought for me today. And he shared it with me. And I said, well, what would you do? Would you choose immortality? And he said, absolutely not. Like it was an immediate response. And I said, well but why? Because I like to play devil's advocate. And he said, he's like, well, and he starts talking about the different research and I said, but I mean, is it a conditional thing? Like, is it just because of the state of the world right now? You're like, I actually don't want to be here forever. Thanks. Or what is it? Because you don't like where you live? Like maybe it's location specific, or you need to be around people who are, share the same values a little bit more. And so I was really pushing him. And he finally looked at me and said, "You know what, Mom? It had nothing to do with any of that. Every single story that we have watched that talks about time, what is the one lesson from every single one of those stories?
No,
People
he
who,
posed the question to you.
yeah, he posed it to me, right? Like
Yeah.
roles reversed here.
Yeah.
And he said, the importance of the death mark, of the finite time, it adds meaning and purpose, and it causes you to savor things that you wouldn't if you knew you're going to be here forever. And he's like, I've learned, like, don't mess with time. Be grateful for the time you have, live it the best. And I'm like driving home thinking, oh my God, he just answered my question with story. And so, by the time we get home, I'm realizing I start thinking about some of these other conversations I've had with him that didn't really stick, like watching a court case on TV and him saying, Mom, did you see that? She's the villain. She's lying. And I'm like, no, what? Right, rewind. And he's like, look at that sneer. That's the villain sneer. That's a tell. And I'm thinking, oh my God. So he had walked millions of miles in other people's shoes, character shoes, with someone right next to him who was saying, what do you think about that? Why are they doing that? What would you do in that case? How do you think that's going to end up? What do you think is going to happen to them in their friendship? Whatever the case may be. And so that mindfulness and the stories themselves had created a moral compass for him that I had no idea really existed. I mean, I was watching it, he was a good kid, but I
Mhm.
had no idea that inside here he was making a lot of these decisions because of what he had witnessed on screen with me or in books. And so when he revealed that, I started to beg him to write this book with me, A Religion of Story, because I was like, this is like the easiest way for parents to spend time with their kids. It's fun, it's playful, and to connect. Like how many times you have kids, right?
I do.
And so how was your day at school? And you notice something's going on with them, but you're not quite sure, like,
How to
are they
connect with
ready
it.
to talk
Yeah.
about it yet? Is it safe enough for them to talk about these topics with me? Whatever the case may be, right? Story becomes the most amazing opportunity to have those conversations because I might have an inkling that what he's actually dealing with is something going on with the friends because I noticed something when I was picking him up from school. So as we're watching our show later, maybe I choose one that has a lot of friendship stuff in it. Or maybe I ask him a question or I notice his physiological frustration or reaction to something that's going on screen and I ask him about it. Now he's talking about characters and a story, not himself, but he's telling me everything that's going on inside of him, right? It's a
Mhm.
way for him to process without it feeling so vulnerable at an age where they're still trying to figure out like
Where they
what
are.
are these feelings that I'm
Yeah.
having? Is this, anger? Is it sadness? And so story becomes this amazing opportunity to get to know each other and get to know ourselves really because as I've been working alongside him, part of the part he and I co-wrote this. So I talk about how story really shaped me without having anyone in my space saying, "What do you think about that?" Well, do you think that's a good idea? No, I just got all of the messaging raw. And I can see how it shaped a lot of my decisions for better and for worse. And so I share a lot of that in the book. And then he talks about being raised on story. And so it was really fun to kind of figure out how to tell these stories because he was being raised by the stories and I was being saved by them. I was having moments while I was watching these shows, noticing this part's easy for him, but I'm like having this giant reaction. He's like, "Mom, what's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, this is hard for me because my friendship stuff has been a mess. What do you mean? And I get to tell him some of my, these are my edges with friendship, the connection, the attunement, the deep relationship. Like he and I can literally talk about anything, at least through story. And I know that it's because of how we hung out with it while he was growing up.
It's beautiful. And there's no other way to put that. You, throughout our entire time together today, you talked about how important it was for you to become a mom that you wanted to be. And you did that through your own story. And now you're fleshing that out in all of the books that you've either written or helped somebody else write. So you've been on a very, very powerful journey yourself. And at the very least, you should be proud of what you've become. That
Thank you.
butterfly that you talked about earlier,
Mhm.
absolutely. We have a little bit amount of time left. I want you to give something to our audience, please, those who are watching or listening. That one step.
You
What
know,
value do you have to give to the world
what
today was
what value
the
do you have to
question.
give?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a question that helps a lot of people kind of get to what do I have to give today? You don't have to go to a training program. You don't have to, get another degree. You don't have to use someone else's degree like it was my first, knee-jerk reaction. Um, you have something right now, or else you wouldn't be thinking about it.
Mm.
But there's one other moment that I can share, another question that made this easier for me. And that was when I was working with a gentleman who he he was working with me on a book, and then he called me a few months in and he said, you know what, I have to take a break for a little bit because I he said he had to go fight cancer. And so I'd heard through the grapevine that he was in remission, he was coming back, but I hadn't heard from him yet. And then I got an email as soon as I hit my send on my campaign for this. I'm going to write my first book in 6 months, like a crazy person. And he emails me back and says, "This sounds amazing. I'm so excited and proud of you. Could you also help me because the doctors had given him 30 days left, 30 days." And he was like, "I have three things that I have to do. I have to marry my wife in a church, or she'll kill me before I die. I have to transfer my business over to the people that are going to take it over, which shouldn't be anything because that's what I'm all about, right?" And then he said, and the third thing is I have to write this book because it would be such a shame if I died with all of this in me.
Yeah.
And so for me, walking alongside him for 30 days while he was leaving the world and leaving some of the best of him in it on the pages, um, it changed the way that I think about everything, and especially my goals and what I want to do and say. It became about legacy. What if I only had 30 days left? What would I say to people? Loved ones? What would I put in a book? How would I how would I adjust my next retreat that would be my last retreat? And so if you get stuck and you're not sure and you're thinking, oh, I don't know which audience and I don't know which message and I don't, 30 days. You can only choose one. What is it?
That puts the story of your son's interaction with his teacher, but what would you do if you had mortality, all into perspective.
100%
Amanda, I
change
want to thank
everything.
you for spending your time with me today on the Question Guy podcast. And for those of you who are watching and listening, we need to make this conversation go viral because this lady is important and you need to read her books. With that being said, I'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.